Hi, welcome back to my channel, Rowie Kiwi. So today I was thinking I would redraw one of my childhood drawings. I've got them all right here in this binder, which they have been in since I drew them. I think most of these drawings are from around like 2008, 2009, maybe 2010, so they're all over a decade old. Let's go ahead and get into it. The time has come to pick the drawing I want to redo. I've got 5 pictures laid out that we chose last video. 2 of them are future self-portraits. I've got a fairy, a genie, and a princess. I'm kind of thinking that it might be, I don't know, a little fun to do one of these 2. I like these ones because they have the descriptions on them. We've got Ala here, who likes to grant extra wishes. She's mischievous, plays pranks, and is a rule breaker. And we've got Fairy Mary, who is a assistant tooth fairy, loves to fly, and hopes to be a full-time tooth fairy. I don't know if you can see this, but I wrote fuel time. Such a tough decision. I'm kind of leaning towards Miss Ala here. And then maybe in another video we can do Fairy Mary and the self-portraits and Miss Amara. I really only want to do one character per video, so Miss Ala it is. So let's get a good look at what she looks like right now. So her colors are like kind of a limey green and a teal green color. She has purple eyes, so I did go very complimentary with her. So green and purple. I'm thinking I'm gonna keep the color scheme kind of similar. I might change it up just a little bit and maybe try and add in something to go along with her description here. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so for this drawing, I'm going to do it in my Canson XL mixed media sketchbook. This one I've just painted the cover black and put stickers on it like I do with all of my sketchbooks. To start out with this drawing, I first found a picture on Pinterest I wanted to use for pose reference. I ended up adjusting the pose just a little bit to suit what I wanted a little bit better. You'll see me fiddle around with the head shape quite a bit. I couldn't decide if I wanted it to be like a 3/4 view or a straight on view. Initially, I did end up going with the straight on view though. When drawing full bodies, I tend to start with the head and work my way down to the feet. I just find it a little bit easier to keep my proportions a little bit better this way. I always start off with very basic shapes, nothing too detailed. This way, if it looks wonky after the pose is done, I can fix it without having to redraw everything. You might be able to tell that I'm floating around the drawing just a little bit, and I've skipped the arms in this drawing so far and went straight down through to the feet. That's because the arms are interacting with the torso. So I just wanted to make sure that I had everything in place before I drew the arms. You'll also notice that my cats kind of wander in and out of the frame. They are very interested in what I am doing and they want to be right there with me while I do it. They sometimes hang out on the back of my chair while I draw, or sometimes I will set down a whole nother sketchbook so that they can sit on that sketchbook instead of sitting directly on the sketchbook I'm trying to draw in. I don't think that they realize they are kind of hard to see through and draw through, but cats are going to be cats, and I'm not going to do too much more than kick them out of the room for a little bit to get them to stop. You can see my face enter the frame a few times throughout this video. This is because I'm trying to get a better look at what I'm drawing. This mostly will happen when I'm doing more detailed areas or areas with smaller details. Now that the pose is done, I can move on to drawing the outfit. I decided to draw a flowy dress for this character this time instead of the stereotypical like genie girl outfit. I really didn't want to fall into any like crazy tropes when it came to doing the genie. So a flowy dress it was. I really like how it ended up turning out when I was done. So I think it was a good call. I'm still not particularly good at drawing fabrics and clothes. I have a hard time getting it to look right, and I definitely struggle with the folds in fabric, getting it to look natural. But this is all stuff that comes with time and practice, so that is what I've been putting in, is time and practice with drawing clothes, just like I've been putting a lot of time and practice into drawing full bodies and poses that I hadn't been doing before. I know I touched on this in my last drawing video, but I do think it's important to reiterate that it's never too late to expand on your skills and to learn something new and just to keep practicing, because I really did fall into the whole idea that it was too late for me to learn and too late for me to improve. But obviously that's not true, and I have gotten much better in just the past year. So back to what I'm doing on the paper with this drawing. I'm now working on the hand, and I decided it would be kind of interesting if she was holding the oil lamp and she was just finishing coming out of it. So the idea was some smoke would be pouring out of it and she would be coming out of the smoke. I hadn't really fully developed this idea until a little bit later in the drawing. That's why I fully drew out the bottom of the dress, which in a few minutes you'll see I completely erase. Now onto the face. I almost always start with the nose and then move to the eyes. This is because I base the eye width on the nose. Basically, I line up the corner of the eyes with the outside of the nostrils, and then I base the mouth off of the width of the eyes for how big the mouth is. So everything kind of has its place based on the position of the nose. I don't know that this is the best way to do this, but it's the way that I've learned to do it and how I've been doing it for a long time now, so it works for me and it might work for you, but that doesn't mean that it works for everybody. I know some people use guidelines for every piece of the face, so a guideline for the eyes, a guideline for the nose, and a guideline for the mouth. I personally don't do that. I've tried to before and it just wasn't really my thing, so back to the way I did it before. I had started to get a little carried away with the hair and forgot that I needed to be making this drawing similar to the drawing I did when I was a kid, and went to give Allah here a really long hairstyle. But in the picture, she has like a cute little bob or something, so I wanted to keep with that and do the short hair also. Initially, I wasn't sure if I was going to outline this drawing or not, but in the end, after I had already broken out all of my watercolor supplies, I decided I would add an outline. For the liner, I used the Spectrum Noir art liner, which is one of my favorites because it works well for watercolor and it works well with Copics or alcohol markers. I'm not entirely sure if they still sell these liners or not, because for a while it was really hard for me to find them. So for most of the drawing I'm using an 03 size liner, and I think for the smaller details I go in with an 01. So the 01 would have been on like the face and the hands a little bit. This is because I want to get a more precise line in these areas. You can also tell I want to get a better line in these areas because I put my face so close to the drawing just to make sure that I am really getting the line where I want it, and even then I still kind of mess up on the liner a little bit. There's a few little wonky areas, but I chose to not worry about it. I used to completely abandon drawings if there was any little area that I messed up on, and I learned that you just can't do that with everything. You have to work through it, because one little mistake does not make a bad piece of art. Also, a lot of times people can't even tell that it's wonky or weird. It's just you can because you did it. With all of this inking, I'm really focusing on the outlines, like the actual outlines around the outside of the characters and the clothing. I also add in all of these texture lines for the dress. I have to really pull myself back sometimes because I get very tempted to just add a bunch of details with the pen that don't necessarily help any and sometimes can make the drawing look a little too busy. So I'm really trying to be careful about that with this drawing, like not too many lines on the dress, which I think I was getting dangerously close to, because not all of these lines make a lot of sense. They just help with the idea that the dress is flowy and very like ruched or crinkled. I kind of had the idea that it was maybe like one really big piece of fabric that was kind of just draped around their body and made this dress, and that it was just kind of tied onto them with the waistband, kind of very like ancient Greek or Roman. Now that the line art is completely done, I went through and erased all of the pencil markings. That way when I go over in the watercolor, they don't get permanently sealed onto the paper and you won't be able to see them as much. I also had to clean this palette out a little bit. It was pretty dusty. It's been quite a long time since I did an actual watercolor drawing or painting, but I really thought that watercolor would suit the flowiness that I was going for with the dress and the smoke in this painting, so that's what I decided to go with for the medium. I'm using my Koi watercolor set that I've had for years and years and years. I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions on this palette, but I personally like it. I don't do any super serious watercolor work, so it works for what I need it to. I'm also using a skin color that I had mixed up a while ago that was already sitting in the palette. I just reactivated it and fixed the color just a little bit, and then it was good enough to go. After finishing up the skin, I decided that I should mix up the greens I wanted to use for the character. I tried to stick pretty close to the colors that were in the original drawing, so kind of a lighter limey green, some teal greens, and I decided to bring some blues in also. In the original drawing, I was very segmental with the colors, like one piece of clothing would be one color and the next would be a different color. For this one, I decided that a gradient from light to darkest would be a good idea. I just think it's a little more interesting than the segmented colors. The gradient also would allow me to incorporate the smoke a bit better into the dress, as if she were actually rising up out of the smoke and was a part of it, rather than it being just something around her feet. After working with the watercolor on this piece, I really kind of missed it. I used to do a lot of watercolor drawings and paintings back a few years ago. For a while, it was pretty much all I ever did was watercolor. For the smoke, I decided to do like the wet and wet technique with the watercolor, so it would be a little more flowy. I was doing kind of these patches of color and wanting it to kind of run into each other. I really played around with the smoke a bit. I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing. I kind of was just going with the flow, trying to make it incorporate into the dress as I went. I knew that I didn't want all of the colors to blend in seamlessly. I really wanted the colors to have some separation, because the goal at the end of the smoke paint being dried, I wanted to take my fine liner and detail it out a little bit. Every now and then you'll see me picking up the drawing so that I can make the paint run in a certain direction so that it would stop pooling up in some areas. Some areas it would just really sink into because the paper was curling or waving. That's the biggest issue with working with the mixed media sketchbook instead of working with specific watercolor paper. If I had initially thought that I was going to do it in watercolor, I probably would have chosen a different paper to work with. Fortunately, I wasn't doing too many layers and I wasn't putting a whole lot of water on the paper, so it didn't end up being too big of an issue. Between these cuts, I had off camera added a few shadows in on the skin, nothing too crazy. I forgot to record it. As soon as I'm done painting this oil lamp, I move into the hair. I had decided that I was not going to do these stripes of color through the hair. Instead, I did the back of the hair being one solid teal blue color and decided to do a lighter green in the front. Definitely kind of reminiscent of like e-girl hairstyles. I'm getting very close to being done now. All I am doing here at the end of the video is adding in some line marks to kind of separate out the different colors of the smoke. Just kind of help to add a little bit of flow to the smoke, a little more form to it. While I was doing this, I was very careful to keep all of my lines very short and kind of choppy. I did not want any solid lines through the smoke. The goal was really to just accentuate the different colors and kind of break up any significant amounts of blending in the smoke. I really kind of just took my time with this. I really wanted it to not look too crazy and kind of match in with the dress also. I didn't want it to be overbearing. At this point, it's really just final details that I'm adding in after the smoke is finished up. I have to go back and add the color to the hair because I had to wait for the dark color to dry before I could add in the light color to the front. And I have to color in the eyes. I did stick with the color purple for the eyes to keep with the drawing, like I said throughout the video. I really wanted to keep a lot of the colors very similar. So the eyes are purple, but I did add in a little bit of blue to the edges just to make it a little less stand out. The last thing I'm doing here is adding a bit more texture to the hair, and then this painting is basically done. So here is the comparison of the old Ala to the new Ala. I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. After I finished recording, I went back and added in a few little highlights to the eyes and to the oil lamp, but outside of that, this is the new Ala. I hope you enjoyed watching me redraw one of my oldest childhood drawings, and I hope you tune in next time. Thanks for watching.